Good morning. Hey, we're continuing our Who Told You That series. I've got, I think, 2 more weeks to this, and then should wrap it up. Thank you. But today, I'm going to start out with a story about my dogs. We have 2 dogs, a white boxer. His name is Desmo. And then I think he's a Frenchie. That's what Marty tells me. French bulldog. His name is Rev. I got a picture of them. Like these are our two guys. Anyway, they're cute. But at our house, we have some rules for the dogs. One of those rules is no dogs on the couch. And definitely no dogs on this big love sack that we have in the living room. They're not allowed on there. And when I'm home, they obey perfectly. Like model citizens, couch, what couch? They stay away from it typically. If it's just me at home, they're definitely not on the couch or the love sack. There's some violators in our home that allow them to. At one point, there was someone who spent a lot of time at our house, and she would call the dogs up onto the couch. And I was like, no, Brittany, stop it. So I've had to try and break that. But when I'm home, they don't get on the couch. But the second I leave, they're on it. Like they ride up on the couch every time. The boxer, the white boxer, is like the main offender. He knows. I'm not sure that the Frenchie understands really anything, so he just looks at me with his tongue out most of the time. So I don't know if he really knows what's going on. But the boxer, Desmo, he knows. He knows the rules. He knows what he's supposed to do. He's known for years. Sometimes I'll come home and he doesn't hear me pull in, and I'll catch him. I catch him on the couch, and it's the funniest thing in the world because when I catch him, he tries to slide off the couch, tries to stay as low, slithers off the couch to pretend like he wasn't there. It's like this slow motion, guilty slither, just like you don't see anything. It's hilarious. But other times I don't catch him. But it's obvious that he's been on the couch because he's a white boxer. So he has small white hairs. So then there'll be hairs all over the cushions of our gray leather couch. And I will stand at the couch and just brush all the hair off. I'm like, Desmo! Looking at him, and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Or if I don't catch him and I lay in the love sack in my black t-shirt, and I get up, it is covered in white hairs. They were taught what to do. They know the rules. Desmo knows the rules. But the hair on the couch and on the love sack, that is the receipt that he's not following the rules. I love my dogs. I love them both. Not equally, but both. No, I love my dogs, and Desmo's not a bad dog. He's just a dog. And I'm telling you about him because a lot of us, myself included, were taught a kind of obedience that works exactly like this. Behave when God is watching. You can get away with it when he's not. Kind of. Nobody would actually say that God's not watching. Obviously, if we ask any of us, is God always watching? We would say yes, of course. God's omnipresent. Of course, he's always watching. That's, as we've talked through this series, that's our God concept. That's the knowledge that we have of God. We know that he's omnipresent, that God is everywhere. But our God image, the way that we feel in this relationship with God, most of the days, I would say that we don't feel a God who is watching. until like shame creeps in, and then we're like, uh-oh, like I'm caught, I'm in trouble, I did what I wasn't supposed to do. Suddenly, like, the watching is everywhere, and we're my boxer sliding off the couch. Like, God, you didn't see this, God. So we do these like mental gymnastics of God's kind of watching, but I could do this, and he's not. Like, we compartmentalize, because if we really felt watched by God all the time, we couldn't function. Not in that type of belief system. So underneath this like whole arrangement is a question that if any of us said out loud might make us kind of uncomfortable. And the question is this. It's the one that we've kind of been hovering around this since like week 4 of this series. It's the one that I get from a lot of you when I'm teaching something like this. The question is, if there's no fear in the theology that we're teaching, if we're saying that fear-based theology is not it, if there's no fear of like punishment or hell or losing myself, like what's to keep me from doing whatever I want? Right? Anybody ever had that question? Just me and the people in my DMs. I've heard this question for years. There's this situation that happens quite a bit where pastors who disagree with me on some theological place that I've landed, usually someone like I have a relationship with, maybe I'm sitting with them, we're talking, and they're asking like how I got somewhere. Like they're genuinely trying to figure out like where's the brake in my theological car, right? Like where do you stop on this? Where are the brakes at? It's a fair question, and I'll try and answer it as honestly as I can. But first, these pastors, whenever a pastor pushes back on what I believe about sin, repentance, hell, my beliefs on LGBTQ inclusion, the conversation, it almost always goes to the same place. Not almost, it always goes to the same place. Within a couple minutes, it always goes to LGBTQ, and the pastor is saying something like, well, I mean, if I just wanted to cheat on my wife, wouldn't that be wrong? Wouldn't that be a sinful lifestyle? Would you be okay with me living in a sinful lifestyle? Like literally, I've heard this version of this question so many times. And so now when we're having this conversation, I start listening. I'm like, all right, I'm just waiting for it to come. And for me, like gently, because I do love these guys and trying to be as honest as I can. But when a man tells me that the only thing keeping him from cheating on his wife is the threat of divine punishment, he's telling on himself a little bit. And it's not always cheating on a wife. There's another part of it that I get, but I think there's kids in here. So they're always like, well, if I'm addicted to watching this thing, or would you be okay with that? You guys know where I'm going with this? He's admitting that fear is the brake for him, that without the threat, he'd do exactly the thing he's warning me about. And I want to ask as kindly as I can, if fear is the only thing keeping you faithful to your spouse, to your kids, to your community, like, then how solid is the love underneath that? Because it's not the obedience of a husband who adores his wife. That's like the obedience of a hostage. Really, like, and those are two very different things. Because fear can make you comply to the rules, but only love can make you want to. And Jesus was always after the want. So last week I said fear changes behavior, but it doesn't change the person. It produces compliance without transformation. So people who act right in public fall apart in private under this fear system. Fear can produce that hostage, but it can't produce like a child of love, like someone who believes they are an heir to the kingdom. And here's something I want you to hear today. We don't have to argue this in theory because we have decades of receipts. Like, look at what fear-based theology has actually produced. Every week, another Christian leader is in the news for something hidden. Sexual abuse, financial fraud, affairs, cover-ups. In 2019, our own paper, the San Antonio Express News, along with the Houston Chronicle, did a 6-month investigation called Abuse of Faith, exposing the Southern Baptist Convention leaders and how they'd spent 2 decades covering up sexual abuse. About 380 leaders and 700 victims were found in this study. Many of the abusers had been moved quietly from church to church. And then in 2022, the SBC, Southern Baptist Convention, they were forced to release like a public list of accused abusers. And the list was 200 and, am I cutting out? The list was 205 pages long. So 205 pages. And the part that should like sit with us, straight from the Express News editorial board, says this: SBC leaders have used their lack of hierarchy as an excuse for why they've done so little to punish predators. Yet they've been able to expel churches that violated their rules by having female pastors or welcoming gay and lesbian worshipers. I read that again. They couldn't act on sexual abuse, but they could act on women in ministry and LGBTQ affirming churches. This isn't a structural problem. It's a values problem. It tells you exactly what the framework prioritizes and exactly what it doesn't. And these aren't outliers. This is a pattern. And if we stop ignoring it, maybe we can address it. I don't want to sound like I'm just attacking the church, but I think we have to call it out. That, like, my intention here is not to just attack. My hope would really be that we would start asking better questions in the church. Like, actually look at the fruit of what our theology and frameworks produces. Matthew 7:15, Jesus says, "Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them." Which is always funny because this verse will get thrown at me. I'm like, okay. Let's look at some fruits. Mine aren't always good, but I think that love, joy, peace, kindness, faith, like these are the things that we're trying to achieve here. If the fruit is producing things that harm people and they don't protect the vulnerable, then I think it's absolutely mandatory that we start asking questions. And the pushback I'll hear on this question or on this approach is, yeah, but Chad, the church does like so much good, like enormous amounts of charity work. Church gives billions every year. They're in hospitals and food banks and shelters. They're often the biggest organization serving people in need. And all of that is true. That's real work. It matters. But my thought there is that there's still something underneath all of this. You guys know that I'm in school doing psychological research. So I've got lots of questions. And when I look at things like the psychology of religion has long produced like paradoxical literature findings on religion and like religiosity. In the way, this is what I mean, the paradox here. Religion in studies correlates with both pro-social behavior and prejudice. Or religion correlates with compassion and authoritarianism. So basically when psychology researchers say someone is more religious, like what they actually mean, it's a combination of a few measurable things, but how often does somebody attend church? How important do they say their faith is to them? How strongly they hold their religious beliefs? How central religion is to their identity and how they see the world? So you ask all these questions, and once you get a list of people that score high on religiosity, so their religion matters to them, and most of these studies are on Christianity in the U.S. right now. You score high, so these things get measured, and then you add them together, and you get a score for how religious a person is. And the more they show up, the more they pray, the more central their faith, the higher their religiosity score, right? And then researchers will take that finding and they'll correlate that score with other things. Like, are these people more generous, more likely to volunteer, more likely to help a stranger? Yes. Oftentimes, when they're studying this, the high religiosity leads to giving more to charity or serving more hours. But are the same people also more likely to hold prejudiced views? More likely to support authoritarian leaders? More likely to discriminate against people outside of their group? Also, yes, those correlate in the psychological research findings. So in the same study, the same people can give to charity and volunteer their hours and also be highly prejudiced. And this doesn't shock anyone. How does the same thing produce both? How does high religiosity produce both of these things? Well, that's the question I'm trying to find out. That's the question that I want to test. That's my focus, one of my focuses in the research. But my growing belief in this is that the God image that we've talked about, a person carry, like the God image that a person carries, how they feel about God, who they feel God is God a punishing God, a God that is evaluating their performance, or is God a loving God, a kind God, one that forgives, one that is unconditionally loving? Like, which way do you experience God? And I think my belief is that God image that a person carries matters more than how religious they are. And a lot of the studies don't measure these things. So studies are finding like religiosity reliably predicts compassion. This is an interesting one, but it doesn't reliably predict empathy. That one stood out to me. There's like lots of studies. High religiosity, compassionate people. High religiosity, not really empathetic. And most of you probably don't live in this world, but watching over the last few years, pastors have become like anti-empathy in a lot of their content. Empathy is not Christian, is not Christ-like, which is mind-blowing. But here's my thought on this. Here's where I'm landing right now. Compassion is the impulse to help. Like, it can come from a beautiful place. But I also think it's performance compatible. Like, it can coexist with an evaluating God who rewards moral effort. So a God who is grading your performance in that God image, compassion can fit in that. Because the more compassionate I am, the better I look. And I'm not saying that everyone, that's the reason they're compassionate. But I think this is where this correlation happens. You can be compassionate and still believe certain people don't deserve your help. Empathy is feeling with someone, entering their experience. And empathy requires what compassion doesn't. You have to feel safe from evaluation yourself to enter another person's pain. Because if, like, let's just use an analogy. Like, if someone is messy and you're being graded on your performance of how clean you are, when you get into their mess and you become messy also because you're in it, then you're being evaluated. So with empathy, if you are in the mess with someone, you can't be unless you can live in a place where evaluation isn't the focus. Only a non-evaluative God image makes that possible. Like, watch how this plays out. The church builds hospitals and supports wars that destroy them. After 9/11, American evangelicals became one of the most consistent blocs supporting military action against Muslim-majority countries. Still are. Prominent Christian leaders publicly call Islam a wicked religion, while their church funds mission work in those regions because there's an evaluation part of that. So compassion for the convert and then warfare on everyone else. The church runs food pantries on Saturday. On Sunday, preaches that immigrants and the poor don't deserve government help. They need to work for it, prove they deserve it. The deserving poor get charity. The undeserving, they get policed. That is compassion without empathy. It's selective, it's evaluative, it's performance compatible with the God image that most of us inherited. But my thought is the fruit testifies. So what's the alternative? Jesus said something that almost every Christian in this room has heard 100 times. It's usually quoted as a warning, sometimes a threat, almost never like a description. But Jesus says, if you love me, keep my commands. If you love me, you'll keep my commandments. Most of us read that verse like this: if you love me enough, you better keep my rules. A test, a condition, a door you have to keep proving you're worthy to walk through. I think we've been reading it wrong. Jesus isn't making a condition here. That's not how Jesus worked. He's making an observation, stating a fact about how love actually works. When you genuinely love someone, you don't need a rule telling you not to hurt them. The love itself makes harm unthinkable. The relationship protects the relationship. That's not lowering a bar of obedience. That's relocating the source. And when Jesus says, keep my commands, we typically want to ask, like, what commands, right? And the church has spent 2,000 years importing all kinds of things onto that list. The entire Old Testament code, Paul's letters as a rule book, centuries of moral codes that varied by culture and era. We hand all of that to people and say, this is what loving God looks like. Keep all of this. But in the same set of scripture, Jesus told us in his own words what loving him looks like. He gave us a specific picture. He said, for I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me a drink. I was homeless and you gave me a room. I was shivering and you gave me clothes. I was sick and you stopped to visit. I was in prison and you came to me. I'm telling the solemn truth. Whenever you did one of these things to someone overlooked or ignored, that was me. You did it to me. When Jesus tells us what his commandments actually are, he doesn't list the things the modern church spends most of its energy on. He doesn't mention sexual ethics. He doesn't mention dietary purity. He mentions hunger, thirst, homelessness, sickness, being a stranger and experiencing the relationship, being in prison and experiencing someone visiting. The commandments Jesus is asking us to keep are about how we treat each other. And the part that I think should sit with us is, in this, the context of it, Jesus is not talking to like outsiders. He's not warning outsiders about what it looks like and how they're going to get kicked out. Or he's standing in front of his own religious community, the people who consider themselves God's people, and telling them that on the day of judgment, the question is how they treated the hungry, the sick, the imprisoned, the stranger. Look at what some of the early church fathers said about this. Not to share your own wealth with the poor is theft from the poor and deprivation of their means of life. We do not possess our own wealth, but theirs. Thomas Aquinas, 13th century theologian, probably like the greatest like Catholic philosopher. Aquinas says this when talking about this. In cases of need, all things are common property. If the need be so manifest and urgent that the present need must be remedied, then it is lawful for a man to succor his own need by means of another's property. Nor is this properly speaking theft or robbery. So if someone needs something and you have it and they take it, that's not theft because they needed it. This is how far Aquinas goes with this. So when the pushback happened, and Aquinas was responding, when they say, but isn't sharing supposed to be voluntary? Aquinas says no. In cases of genuine need, sharing isn't voluntary. Withholding is the violation. In Matthew 25, the people being told, depart from me, I never knew you, are not pagans. They are religious people, church people. They thought they were on the right side. This was an indictment on his own faith community. And so we have to ask questions about ours. Because again, the fruit testifies to what we believe and what we are teaching and how we see God and experience Jesus. I'm not saying let everybody steal your stuff. But we have to be honest about this. It's a hard time right now, financially. We are still in the greatest place we could be ourselves, comparatively speaking. There's a guy that sleeps in the back corner of our church every single night. He's been there for 5 years probably. Buddy and I have had so many conversations over 5 years. He calls me Pops, which is weird because he's older than me. I've tried to get Buddy into housing and apartments and just different types of programs and help. And he's always like, I'm ready. And then we'll try. And then he fights with someone. And I've heard Buddy's story. I love Buddy. But if we're not taking care of Buddy, then we're not taking care of Jesus. And we have to ask, what is the fruit of what we believe? In the same move, the same idea, Jesus is talking again to religious people. He's talking to the religious lawyer. And the religious lawyer asked him a question, who is my neighbor? Because he's trying to figure out, who am I supposed to, they were talking about the commandments, keep my commands, love God, love your neighbor as yourself. And this guy's like, cool, who's my neighbor? Just so I know who I have to love. Which, if we're honest, that's the question we ask in the church. in the modern church. Like, okay, who do I really have to take care of? Not long ago, J.D. Vance gave a talk about this like belief, this Catholic belief that like I'm supposed to take care of myself, my family, and then others. It was this list. And the Pope was like, you got that all wrong. Which the Pope, he's ready. He's ready to go. So who's my neighbor? The question, it's a boundary question. Who do I have to love? Who's in my circle? Who's out? Jesus doesn't answer the question. He tells the story, right? The story of the Good Samaritan. A man is beaten and left for dead. A priest walks up and walks past him. He can't get dirty. The rules say he can't get dirty. A Levite, another religious worker, walks past. Both are busy. Both have rules that they have to follow in order to stay pure and clean and religiously holy. They walk past him. Then a Samaritan, the cultural enemy of the Jews, a heretic, the wrong kind of person, gets down in the dirt with him, cleans his wounds, carries him to an inn, and pays for his care. And says, if there's anything left, I'll pay the balance. I'll be back. And Jesus, in this story, flips that question. He doesn't answer, who is my neighbor? He asks the lawyer, which of these three proved to be a neighbor? Do you hear the move there? The lawyer asks who counts, who's in, and Jesus says, wrong question. The right question is, who acted like a neighbor? Who is loving others? The priest and the Levite, they probably gave to charity. They had compassion, but they didn't have empathy. They didn't enter the man's suffering. The Samaritan did. And honestly, like by that test, a lot of what gets called Christian in this country today fails miserably. We've built an industry around policing who people sleep with while ignoring the people sleeping outside. We've built movements around protecting our preferences while abandoning the prisoner, the immigrant, the poor. Jesus told us the test. We just didn't want to take it. Now, someone here is already thinking, okay, well, what about Paul? Because we're Christians and Paul's kind of our guy, right? Because Paul has lists. He gives us some lists. Galatians 5, 1 Corinthians 6, Romans 1, their behaviors, things that keep you out of the kingdom. And the modern church has built theological systems around those lists, made them into like rule codes, used them as ammunition. But Paul himself told us what happens when you turn his teachings into a rule code. Listen to Romans 7. It says this, but I need something more. For if I know the law but still can't keep it, and if the power of sin within me keeps sabotaging my best intentions, I obviously need help. I realize that I don't have what it takes. I can will it, but I can't do it. I decide to do good, but I don't really do it. I decide not to do bad, but then I do it anyway. My decisions, such as they are, don't result in actions. Something has gone wrong deep within me and gets the better of me every time. Paul's describing exactly what we saw earlier in this, like fear-based, rule-based, self-monitoring obedience. And he's telling us it doesn't work. He actually says that the law, where the rule code is at, increases sin. When you have these rules that you're trying to follow, and you're trying to follow them because they're the rules, it increases sin. That was the point of it, so that grace can abound. And then when he's asked the question, like, okay, so we have grace, like we can just keep on sinning, he's like, man, you got it wrong. Like you're still trying to put it in the rule book. We don't play that game. There's this cool story. William Paul Young, I think is his name, the guy that wrote The Shack. I heard him tell a story about this guy dies. He was a pastor most of his life, like did ministry for 30 years, gave to charity, did everything right. He dies. He goes to the pearly gates. He's standing there talking to Peter. And Peter's like, hey, welcome. And he goes, okay, so what do I got to do? Like, is it like 100 points? Like I got to prove myself? And Peter's like, sure, go ahead. So he's like, okay, so I've been a pastor for 30 years. I've been ministering like most of my life. And Peter's like, all right, I'll give you 2 points. And he's like, 2 points? Wait, okay, I get to charity and I did this. Okay, I'll give you another point. The guy's like, how am I going to get to 100 points? And while he's doing this, a guy from his town who he knew was kind of sketchy, but he was there. And like every once in a while he would see him. He'd be nice guy, but he spent some time at the bar. Like this wasn't the guy that you would say, this is the best Christian in the world. And the guy comes walking and he's like, hey, Peter. Peter says, what's up? And he walks to the pearly gates and he's like, wait, that guy had 100 points? And Peter goes, no, he just doesn't play that game. But keep going. And I think this is what Paul's saying. The rules aren't what this is about. He's describing and saying that this doesn't work. When you really look at Paul's letters, he is putting the law and grace and freedom next to each other and saying, this is what we're in. We are no longer under the law. We're in grace and freedom. And it leads to loving others. Like, the more you focus on not doing the bad thing, the more the bad thing becomes all you can see. Right? I would say we were all kids, but we were all adults. Like, we know this. Like, this is the pastor saying, well, what if I cheat on my wife? You're focused on something, and it's not the right thing. A corrupted mindset, it finds validation easily. Tell someone they are fundamentally sexual beings whose desires must be suppressed. Then that's all they will think about. Tell them they are inherently selfish. They will only see their own selfishness. The framework reinforces what it claims to fight. So how do we read Paul's lists then? Realistically, what does this look like? We read them relationally. Not as a rule code, as relational diagnostic tools. Here's his vice list in Galatians 5. It is obvious what kind of life develops out of trying to get your own way all the time. Repetitive, loveless, cheap sex, a stinking accumulation of mental and emotional garbage, frenzied and joyless grabs for happiness, trinket gods, magic show religion, paranoid loneliness, cutthroat competition, all-consuming yet never satisfied once, a brutal temper, an impotence to love or to be loved, divided homes and divided lives, small-minded and lopsided pursuits, the vicious habit of depersonalizing everyone into a rival, uncontrolled and uncontrollable addictions, ugly parodies of community. Every item on that list is a description of harm to somebody. Harm to another person, or a corrupted self-view that is spilling out onto others. Loveless sex, harm. Brutal temper, harm. Depersonalizing others, harm. Addictions that consume the people around you, harm. Like, these are all harmful things in relationships. Paul isn't handing us a checklist of things God doesn't like. He's describing what corrupted self-perception produces when it leaks into relationships. Then the fruit list from last week: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, also relational. Every item is a way of treating others well. He isn't handing us two opposing rule books. He's describing what comes out of a corrupted body versus a regulated one. The vice list is what flows from shame-driven self. And the fruit list is what flows from a body that knows it is loved. You can't white-knuckle your way from one list to the other. You can only, as Jesus said, change your mind. Metanoia. Receive love at a level deep enough that your body starts producing different fruit. There's so much like psychology on it, like how motivation's extrinsic and intrinsic, and what actually motivates us and what doesn't, and you guys can look that up. Or even developmental research with kids. Like, if you tell a child for 10 years that they're fundamentally corrupt, that their desires are dangerous, their bodies are sinful, their natural impulses must be suppressed to be acceptable, you produce exactly what the headlines show every single week. Hidden lives, repressed shame, eventual collapse. Because shame-based formation does not produce holiness. It produces hiding. It produces double lives. It produces the very thing it claims to prevent. The fruit testifies. So, what does love-based or love-sourced obedience actually look like on a Monday morning? It looks like honesty. Not because lying is on a prohibited list, but because deception fractures the relationship you care about. Or generosity. Not because the tithe is 10%. This is the moment. You guys ready? But because a person who knows they're provided for finds it easy to give. And they give to things that they believe are doing good work. Or fidelity. Not because of the consequences of failure, but because the relationship itself is worth protecting. Welcoming of the stranger. Not because Jesus said to, but because you know what it feels like to be welcomed and you can't stop extending that. Care for the poor, the sick, the imprisoned. Not because Matthew 25 commands it, but because once you've been seen, you can't look away from someone the world has stopped seeing. Love-sourced obedience doesn't look like fear-based obedience, like with the volume turned down. It's a completely different thing, sourced from somewhere else entirely. And here's the thing that nobody told me when I was younger. You are never going to figure this out. Nobody in this room has this figured out. I've literally been studying this stuff for like 20 years now, and I still can't figure it out. And I mean this is good news. We think the goal of the Christian life is to eventually arrive somewhere, to get to a point where we're mature enough, holy enough, sanctified enough to finally have the answers. But if the goal is to experience God's love and to love others well, you can't arrive. There's no figuring it out. There's no destination where we suddenly have it worked out. Paul tells us in Ephesians 3, we've read this verse throughout this series, like the love of God is so vast that his prayer is that you would just continue to find it, just continue to find the edges of it, chase it. Paul says God's love is so vast, wide, long, high, deep, that it will never find the edges of it. Not in this lifetime, not in the next. There is always more. We don't arrive, we don't graduate, we keep going. Hebrews puts it like this: let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. Notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't say finish the race. It doesn't say win the race. It just says run it. Keep running. Eyes on Jesus, marked out for you. What are we running toward? Paul tells us earlier in Ephesians, for we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. Good works prepared in advance. What good works? I would argue the ones Jesus described in Matthew 25. Seeing people. Loving the person God puts in front of you in this moment. There's like 8 billion people on this earth. 8 billion good works God has prepared. 8 billion opportunities to show love, to show up. We keep learning, we keep growing, we keep finding new ways to love. Every day a new adventure, every day someone new to love well. Every day a creative challenge to figure it out. How do I love this person in front of me in this moment, in this season? What can I do that is loving them? You can't find the edge of that because there's always more people and there's always more ways to love. The journey of this life is the adventure. Like that's it. The journey is it. The destination is just the moment we get to look back at where we've been. So here's a question I'm going to leave you with. Sit with it. Don't answer it today. What would it look like to approach that same area of your life that maybe you've been living from fear? You've been trying to white knuckle your way through it. What would it look like to approach that same area from a place of love instead? Like think about it. Think about the area of your life where you're still trying to obey out of fear. Still managing, performing, white knuckling it, behaving when you feel watched and falling apart when you're not. What would it look like to approach that same area from a place of love instead? Because this is the only kind of change Jesus ever asked for. Not effort, reorientation. Not working harder, a new desire. Fear can make you comply. Love can make you want to. And Jesus was always after the want. It's a different kind of obedience, sourced not from fear, but from love, made complete. And the way that love is made complete is what we say every single week. Arsenal, go love well. It's who you're made to be. I love you guys. Go do that. We'll see you next week.